The Great Hall of the Galactic Federation was the largest room in the known universe. It could hold 10,000 beings from 100 different worlds. Today, every seat was filled. The air buzzed with tension and angry whispers. Ambassador Lisa Grant walked into the hall with her head held high. She was a tall woman with gray hair and calm eyes. She had spent 30 years speaking for Earth in this place. She had faced angry aliens before, but today felt different. Today, the hatred in the room was stronger than she had ever felt. Captain Kevin Cole walked beside her. He was younger, maybe 40 years old, with broad shoulders and a military posture. He wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's space fleet. He had been called here without explanation, pulled from his ship in the middle of a routine mission. "Do you know what this is about?" Kevin asked quietly. "No idea," Lisa admitted. "But whatever it is, they're furious." They took their seats in the human section. Around them, aliens of every shape and size glared in their direction. The Velthari, beings made of living crystal, pulsed with angry red light. The Keth, giant insects with 4 arms, clicked their jaws in displeasure. Even the peaceful Moravani, ancient creatures who rarely showed emotion, looked disturbed. High Chancellor Moravan rose from his seat at the center of the hall. He was very old, perhaps the oldest living being in the galaxy. His skin was like tree bark, and his 4 arms moved slowly as he called for silence. "This emergency session has been called by the Velthari Dominion," he announced. His voice was deep and slow. "Ambassador Zyrith, please present your case." A Velthari stepped forward. His crystal body was tall and sharp, catching the light and throwing it around the room. When he spoke, his voice rang like a bell. "Honored delegates," Zyrith began, "I come before you today to expose a crime. A crime so terrible that I struggled to believe it when I first learned of it. The humans of Earth have been hiding a dark secret from this Federation." Lisa felt her stomach tighten. What could this be about? Earth had nothing to hide. They had joined the Federation 50 years ago and followed every rule. 3 months ago, Zyrith continued, our monitoring stations intercepted signals from Earth. We were conducting routine observation, nothing more. But what we found shocked us to our core. He waved his hand, and a holographic image appeared in the center of the hall. It showed a building on Earth, a large brick structure surrounded by a fence. Human children moved around inside the fence. Some ran and played. Others sat in rows inside the building, facing an adult who stood at the front of the room. "The humans call these places schools," Zyrith said. The word dripped with disgust. "There are thousands of them on Earth. Millions of human children are held inside them." The hall erupted in gasps and angry shouts. Lisa looked at Kevin with confusion. "Schools? This was about schools?" "These children," Zyrith continued, "are taken from their families at a very young age. Some as young as 5 Earth years. They are forced into these facilities against their will. They must stay there for most of each day, following strict schedules and rules." He changed the image to show a classroom. Children sat at desks, writing in notebooks while a teacher watched them. They are subjected to mental conditioning. They must memorize information and repeat it back on command. Those who fail are punished with low marks. Those who succeed are ranked against each other, creating competition and stress among mere children. Another image showed children in a gymnasium, running and jumping while a coach blew a whistle. They are forced to perform physical exercises. They are made to compete in games against each other. Their bodies are pushed to exhaustion. The final image showed a child crying while looking at a paper covered in red marks. And when they fail to meet the standards set by their captors, they are made to feel shame. They are told they are not good enough. They are compared unfavorably to their peers. Zyrith turned to face the human delegation directly. His crystal body burned with orange fury. You imprison your own children, he declared. You subject them to years of mental and physical conditioning. You break their spirits through competition and shame. And you do this to every single child on your planet. The hall exploded with noise. Aliens shouted and screamed. Some called for Earth to be expelled from the Federation. Others demanded that human children be rescued from these terrible places. Lisa Grant stood up. She held her hands out, trying to calm the crowd, but no one would listen. The noise grew louder and louder. Kevin Cole leaned close to her ear. This is insane, he said. They think schools are prisons? Apparently so, Lisa replied. We need to explain, but they won't let us speak. High Chancellor Morven finally restored order by striking his staff against the floor 3 times. The boom echoed through the hall, and slowly, the delegates fell silent. The human delegation will have a chance to respond, he said. Ambassador Grant, you may speak. Lisa walked to the center of the hall. Every eye was on her. Every being in the room believed she represented a species of child abusers. She took a deep breath. Honored delegates, she began. I understand why these images disturbed you. If I knew nothing about humanity, I might be disturbed too. But I ask you to listen carefully, because I believe there has been a terrible misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Zyrith interrupted. We saw the evidence with our own eyes. Children behind fences. Children forced to sit in rows. Children crying over failed tests. Yes, Lisa agreed. You saw all of those things. But you did not understand what you were seeing. Because human children are not like the children of other species. This statement caused more murmuring in the hall. Lisa pressed on. Most species in this federation are born with knowledge. The Velthari absorb the memories of their ancestors through their crystal structure. The Keth share a collective mind that gives every young one access to the wisdom of the hive. The Maravani pass down thousands of years of learning through direct neural transfer. She paused, making sure everyone was listening. Humans have none of these gifts. When a human baby is born, it knows absolutely nothing. The hall went completely silent. Even Zyrith's angry glow faded to confusion. Nothing? Asked a Keth delegate. Surely that cannot be true. It is completely true, Lisa said. Human infants cannot walk. They cannot speak. They cannot feed themselves. They do not know that fire is hot or that water is wet. They must learn everything, every single thing, from the very beginning. She looked around the hall at the shocked faces of 100 species. And that, she said, is why we have schools. The silence in the Great Hall lasted for a long time. Ambassador Lisa Grant stood in the center, waiting for the delegates to process what she had told them. Human babies were born knowing nothing. For species who inherited all their knowledge at birth, this idea was almost impossible to understand. High Chancellor Morven was the first to speak. His ancient voice was soft with confusion. Ambassador Grant, are you saying that every human must learn how to walk? How to speak? How to eat? Yes, Chancellor, Lisa replied. Every single human must learn these things. It takes about 1 year for a human baby to learn to walk. It takes 2 or 3 years to learn to speak properly. Basic skills that your species are born with take us years to develop. A delegate from the Shimmering Veil, a species made of colored gas, pulsed with blue curiosity. But how do your young survive? If they know nothing, how do they not die immediately? Human parents must care for their children constantly, Lisa explained. For the first several years of life, a human child cannot survive alone for even 1 day. Our babies are completely helpless. They depend on adults for everything. Captain Kevin Cole stood up and walked to join the ambassador. He wanted to help explain, to show the delegates that what they feared was not what they imagined. May I share my own experience? He asked. Lisa nodded, and Kevin, turned to face the assembly. I was born knowing nothing, just like Ambassador Grant described. I don't remember my first years, but my mother told me stories. She said I cried constantly because I was confused and scared. The world made no sense to me. Every sight, every sound, every feeling was new and strange. He paused, remembering. When I was 5 years old, I went to school for the first time. I was terrified. I cried and held on to my mother's leg, begging her not to leave me. Does that sound like the behavior of a prisoner being forced into captivity? It sounds exactly like that, Zyrith said, though his voice had lost some of its anger. Kevin shook his head. It was fear of the unknown. I didn't understand what school was. I only knew that I was leaving my mother for the first time. But within a week, I loved it. I made friends. I learned new things every day. I couldn't wait to go back each morning. You were conditioned to accept your imprisonment, Zyrith argued. That is how all systems of control work. The victims eventually stop resisting. Lisa stepped forward again. Ambassador Zyrith, may I ask you a question? The Velthari hesitated, then nodded. When you were born, you already knew mathematics, correct? The principles of science? The history of your people? Of course, Zyrith replied. All Velthari are born with the accumulated knowledge of our ancestors. So you have never experienced the feeling of not understanding something, and then, through effort and practice, coming to understand it? Zyrith's crystal form flickered. I do not understand the question. That is my point, Lisa said gently. You cannot understand what learning feels like because you have never had to learn. For humans, learning is one of the greatest pleasures in life. When a child finally grasps a difficult concept, when the confusion clears and understanding dawns, it creates a feeling of joy that is hard to describe. She brought up a new image on the holographic display. It showed a young girl, maybe 7 years old, holding up a piece of paper with a proud smile. On the paper was a simple math equation, 7 plus 8 equals 15. This child has just learned addition, Lisa explained. Look at her face. Does she look like a prisoner? Does she look traumatized? The girl in the image was beaming. Her eyes sparkled with pride and happiness. She looks pleased, admitted a Keth delegate. She's more than pleased. She is experiencing one of the deepest joys a human can feel. She has done something difficult. She has struggled and failed and tried again. And finally, she has succeeded. That feeling of achievement is something your species can never know, because you have never had to achieve anything. Your knowledge was given to you. Hers was earned. Kevin added, I remember when I first learned to read. I was 6 years old. For months, the letters on the page were just meaningless shapes. Then one day, something clicked in my brain. The shapes became words. The words became sentences. The sentences became stories. I could suddenly access the thoughts of people who had died 1,000 years ago. It felt like magic. A Moravani delegate raised one of his 4 arms. Captain Cole, you said you attended educational institutions for 18 years. Is this common among humans? Very common, Kevin replied. I spent 6 years in primary school, learning basic skills like reading, writing, and mathematics. Then 6 years in secondary school, learning more advanced subjects. Then 6 years in military academy, learning to pilot spacecraft and lead soldiers. Every stage built on the one before. 18 years, the Moravani repeated slowly. That is nearly a quarter of your natural lifespan. Yes, Kevin agreed. Humans invest enormous resources in education. We build special buildings for it. We train adults to spend their entire careers teaching. We develop books and tools and methods to make learning easier. It is the single biggest investment our society makes, because we know that without it, Our children would grow up helpless and ignorant. Xyrith's form had shifted from angry orange to thoughtful purple. But what about the competition? The testing? The rankings? Even if learning itself is not harmful, surely these elements cause suffering. Lisa nodded seriously. You raise a fair point. Our system is not perfect. Some children do struggle with competition. Some feel crushed by failure. We constantly work to improve our methods, to make education supportive rather than stressful. She changed the image to show a teacher kneeling beside a struggling student, smiling encouragingly. But competition also teaches important lessons. In the real world, resources are limited. Jobs are limited. Opportunities are limited. Children need to learn that they must work hard to achieve their goals. They need to learn how to handle disappointment and keep trying. These are painful lessons, but they are necessary ones. On my world, Xyrith said slowly, we do not compete. There is no need. Everyone is born with the same knowledge, the same abilities. We are all equal from the moment of our creation. And that is wonderful in many ways, Lisa acknowledged. But it also means your society has not changed in thousands of years. You do not innovate. You do not discover new things. You simply preserve what already exists. The hall fell silent again. Lisa's words had struck something deep. The Velthari were proud of their stability, but they had also watched with confusion as younger species like humanity advanced rapidly past them in technology and culture. Humans change, Lisa continued. We grow. Each generation stands on the shoulders of the last, but we also reach higher. We invent new technologies, create new art, develop new ideas. And all of this begins in our schools, where children learn not just facts, but how to think, how to question, how to imagine things that have never existed before. High Chancellor Morrivan leaned forward in his seat. His ancient eyes held a new light. Ambassador Grant, he said, I believe we must see these schools for ourselves. Would humanity permit a delegation to visit one of these educational facilities? Lisa smiled. It would be our honor, Chancellor. I think you will find that what we do to our children is not cruel. It is the greatest gift we can give them. 3 weeks passed between the emergency session and the school visit. During that time, Ambassador Lisa Grant worked day and night to prepare. She needed to find a perfect school, train the staff, and prepare the students without scaring them. She chose Lincoln Elementary School in the small town of Riverside, Ohio. It was an ordinary school in an ordinary town. The building was old but clean. The teachers were experienced and kind. The students were normal children from normal families. Principal Nancy Hughes was nervous when Lisa first contacted her. She was a short woman with curly brown hair and glasses that she was always pushing up her nose. You want aliens to visit my school? Nancy asked, her voice shaking slightly. Yes, Lisa said. 7 of them. They think we are abusing our children by sending them to school. I need to show them they're wrong. Nancy laughed, though it sounded a bit hysterical. Aliens think school is child abuse? That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. To species who are born with all their knowledge, the concept of forced education is horrifying, Lisa explained. They don't understand why we would make children sit in classrooms and memorize facts. They think we're torturing them. Nancy pushed her glasses up and took a deep breath. Well, we'll just have to show them what really happens here. My kids are wonderful. My teachers are dedicated. If these aliens have open minds, they'll see the truth. The delegation arrived on a cool Tuesday morning. 7 beings from 7 different worlds stepped off the shuttle and onto American soil. Ambassador Xyrith led the group, his crystal form catching the autumn sunlight. Behind him came representatives from the Keth, the Moravani, the Shimmering Veil, and 3 other species. Captain Kevin Cole met them at the landing site. He had volunteered to serve as a guide, wanting to see this through from beginning to end. "Welcome to Earth," he said. "Are you ready to see a human school?" "We are ready to see the truth," Xyrith replied. "Whatever that may be." The drive to Lincoln Elementary took 20 minutes. The aliens stared out the windows at the passing scenery. They saw houses with yards and cars in driveways. They saw people walking dogs and children riding bicycles. It was all very ordinary and very strange. "Your world is so chaotic," observed the Keth delegate. "So many individuals doing so many different things." "That's freedom," Kevin said with a small smile. "Every human chooses their own path." When they arrived at the school, Principal Hughes was waiting at the front door. She had managed to control her nerves and now wore a warm, welcoming smile. "Good morning," she said. "Welcome to Lincoln Elementary. My name is Nancy Hughes, and I am the principal here. That means I'm in charge of making sure everything runs smoothly." "In charge of the prisoners," Xyrith said quietly. Nancy heard him but chose not to respond. Instead, she led the group inside. The first thing they saw was the main hallway. The walls were covered with student artwork. Colorful paintings, drawings, and crafts decorated every surface. A banner overhead read, "We love learning," in big, cheerful letters. "These were made by the children?" asked the delegate from the shimmering veil, pulsing with interest. "Yes," Nancy said proudly. "Art is an important part of our curriculum. Children need to express themselves creatively." They passed by a display case filled with trophies and ribbons. "These are awards our students have won in various competitions," Nancy explained. "Spelling bees, science fairs, sports tournaments." Xyrith examined the trophies closely. "The children compete against each other for these prizes?" "Sometimes against each other, sometimes against students from other schools. Competition teaches them to work hard and do their best." "And those who lose? What happens to them?" "They try again next time, or they discover that their talents lie elsewhere. Not every child is good at everything, and that's okay. Part of education is helping children find what they're good at and what they love." They continued to the first classroom, a kindergarten taught by Mrs. Sarah Adams. She was a young teacher with a bright smile and endless energy. When the delegation entered, she was sitting in a circle with her students, reading them a story. "Good morning, everyone," she said cheerfully. "We have some special visitors today. Can everyone say hello?" "Hello." The children chorused, staring at the aliens with wide eyes and open mouths. A small boy named Danny raised his hand. "Are you robots?" The Keth delegate clicked its mandibles in what might have been laughter. "No, young one. We are from other planets." "Cool," Danny shouted, and the other children giggled. Mrs. Adams invited the delegation to observe the lesson. She continued reading the story, a tale about a rabbit who lost his way home and had to ask for help. The children listened with complete attention, their faces showing every emotion as the story unfolded. "Notice how engaged they are," Ambassador Grant said quietly to Xyrith. "They're not being forced to listen. They want to know what happens next." When the story ended, Mrs. Adams asked questions about it. Which character was brave? Which character was kind? What would you do if you were lost? The children raised their hands eagerly, practically bouncing in their seats, desperate to share their thoughts. "This is not how prisoners behave," Kevin observed. Xyrith was silent, watching a little girl named Emma explain in great detail why the rabbit should have asked the owl for directions instead of the fox. "Because owls can see everything from high up." "She's reasoning," Xyrith said finally. "She is using logic to analyze the story." "She was not born with this ability?" "No," Lisa confirmed. "She learned it. She's been practicing for 2 years now, ever since she started school. Before that, She couldn't read at all. She barely knew her colors. The delegation moved through the school, visiting classroom after classroom. They watched second graders practice handwriting, their small fingers gripping pencils as they carefully formed letters. They watched fourth graders learn multiplication, using blocks and charts to understand why numbers worked the way they did. In every room, they saw the same things. Children who were curious. Teachers who were patient. Struggle and frustration, yes, but also triumph and joy. The science lab was particularly impressive. Fifth grade students were growing plants under different conditions to learn about photosynthesis. A boy named Marcus proudly showed the Moravani delegate his plant, which had grown 3 inches in the past week. I thought it was going to die, Marcus admitted. But I didn't give up. I kept watering it and making sure it got enough light. And look at it now. The Moravani studied the plant, then studied the boy. You feel pride in this achievement? Yeah, I made this happen. Well, the plant did the growing, but I helped. That's what my teacher says. We're partners with nature. In the gymnasium, the delegation watched a physical education class. The children played a game called Capture the Flag, running and laughing and shouting. Some were fast and skilled. Others struggled to keep up. But they were all having fun. A girl named Ruby fell and scraped her knee. Before the teacher could reach her, 2 classmates helped her up and walked her to the bench. They stayed with her, making sure she was okay, even though it meant missing part of the game. They care for each other, the Keth delegate observed, even though they were competing moments ago. That's what school teaches, Principal Hughes said. Not just facts and skills, but how to be a good person. How to help others. How to be part of a community. By lunchtime, the aliens were quiet and thoughtful. They had seen so much that challenged their assumptions. These children were not prisoners. They were learners. And learning, they were beginning to understand, was not punishment. It was opportunity. The cafeteria at Lincoln Elementary was a large room filled with long tables and plastic chairs. The smell of food hung in the air, a mixture of pizza, vegetables, and chocolate milk. Children streamed in from all directions, talking and laughing as they found their seats. Principal Hughes had arranged for the alien delegation to eat lunch with a group of third graders. The children had been told about the visitors, but had been given no instructions about what to say or how to behave. Nancy wanted the aliens to see real children being their real selves. The delegates sat down, awkwardly at a table designed for small humans. Ambassador Zyrith's crystal form barely fit in the chair. The Keth delegate had to stand because its body was simply too large. A girl named Mia sat across from Zyrith. She had dark hair in 2 braids and a gap where her front teeth were growing in. She stared at him with open curiosity while eating her pizza. Your body is really pretty, she said suddenly. It's like a diamond. Zyrith was not sure how to respond. Among these people, commenting on someone's physical form was considered rude. But the girl's tone was innocent and kind. Thank you, he said finally. Your hair decorations are also pleasing. Mia touched her braids and smiled. My mom did them this morning. She's really good at hair. Are you from space? Yes, I am from a planet called Velthor. It is very far away. Did you come in a spaceship? Yes, that's so cool. I want to go to space someday. My teacher says if I study hard, maybe I can be an astronaut. This caught Zyrith's attention. You believe that studying will allow you to travel to space? Duh, Mia said, as if this was obvious. You have to learn lots of stuff to be an astronaut. Math and science and how to work with a team. My dad says nothing good comes easy. You have to work for it. At the other end of the table, a boy named Jake was explaining video games to the Moravani delegate. The ancient alien listened patiently, trying to understand why humans would spend time controlling fictional characters on a screen. It's fun, Jake said. And some games teach you stuff too. Like, I learned about history from this one game about ancient Rome. My teacher was surprised when I knew all this stuff about gladiators. You learn from playing? The Moravani asked. Yeah, games teach you without you even realizing it. That's what my mom says, anyway. The lunch continued with dozens of small conversations. The children asked endless questions about the aliens' home worlds, their bodies, their food, their families. The aliens asked questions in return, slowly building a picture of human childhood that was nothing like what they had expected. A quiet boy named Oliver sat next to the Keth delegate. He was small for his age and wore thick glasses. He hadn't said much during lunch, just listened and watched. Finally, the Keth delegate turned to him. You are very quiet, young one. Do you not enjoy speaking? Oliver shrugged. I like listening better. You learn more when you listen. That is wise for one so young. I'm not that young. I'm 9. Oliver paused, then added, I used to be scared of school. I didn't make friends easy. But my teacher helped me find the other kids who like the same stuff I like. Now I have 3 best friends. What stuff do you like? Oliver's face lit up. Bugs. I love bugs. I know everything about them. Did you know that some ants can carry 50 times their own body weight? And butterflies taste with their feet? The Keth delegate made a clicking sound that Oliver didn't understand, but somehow knew was positive. I am also interested in insects. My people evolved from creatures similar to your bugs. Really? That's amazing. Can you lift 50 times your body weight? Only about 20 times. We have grown weaker as we evolved intelligence. Oliver nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense to him. After lunch, the delegation visited the music room. A teacher named Mr. Paul Rodriguez was leading a group of students in a simple song. The children sang together, their voices high and slightly off-key but filled with enthusiasm. Zyrith watched with fascination. Music existed on Velthor, but it was ancient and unchanging. Patterns of sound that had been the same for millions of years. These children were creating something new, something imperfect but alive. They make mistakes, he observed. Some are not singing the correct notes. That's okay, Mr. Rodriguez said with a warm smile. They're learning. Every mistake teaches them something. Next time, they'll be better. And the time after that, better still. But why sing at all if you cannot do it perfectly? Mr. Rodriguez laughed kindly. Because perfection isn't the point. Joy is the point. Connection is the point. When these kids sing together, they become part of something bigger than themselves. That feeling is worth more than perfect notes. The afternoon brought them to the library, where students were quietly reading books. Some sat alone, lost in their own worlds. Others sat in small groups, discussing what they had read. Ambassador Grant found Zyrith standing before a shelf of picture books. He was holding one in his crystal hands, turning the pages slowly. This book is teaching basic concepts, he said. Colors, shapes, numbers, concepts that Velthori children know from the moment of their creation. Yes, Lisa agreed. Human children need books like this. They need to learn that the sky is blue and grass is green. Nothing is obvious to them. It seems so inefficient. So much time spent on things we would consider trivial. Lisa nodded. It is inefficient. Our method of raising children takes 20 years or more. It requires enormous resources and effort. By comparison, your method is far superior. Zyrith turned to look at her, surprised by the admission. But consider what we gain from this inefficiency, Lisa continued. Because human children must learn everything, they develop something your species lacks. They develop the ability to learn. Their minds become flexible, adaptable, capable of growth throughout their entire lives. She gestured around the library, at the thousands of books on the shelves. Every one of these books represents knowledge that some human discovered or created. Every story, every scientific fact, every piece of history was new at some point. Someone had to figure it out for the first time. Someone had to write it down so others could learn it. This process of discovery and transmission is the engine of human civilization. A young girl approached them shyly. Her name tag read Katie, and she was holding a book about dinosaurs. "Excuse me," she said to Zareth. "Are there dinosaurs on your planet?" Zareth looked at the book cover, which showed a large green creature with sharp teeth. "No. What is a dinosaur?" Katie's eyes went wide with excitement. "You don't know about dinosaurs? Oh, you have to learn. They were these giant lizards that lived on Earth millions of years ago. Some of them were as big as buildings, and some could fly, but they all died when a meteor hit the Earth. It's really sad, but also really cool." She opened the book and started showing Zareth the pictures, explaining each dinosaur with the enthusiasm that only a child could have. The ancient alien, who had been born knowing the complete history of his own world, found himself genuinely fascinated. "This one is called a T-Rex," Katie explained. "It had really small arms but huge teeth. Scientists think it could bite through bone." "How do you know these things?" Zareth asked. "Dinosaurs no longer exist. You cannot observe them directly. Scientists figured it out from bones and fossils. It's like a puzzle. They find pieces and put them together to understand what dinosaurs looked like and how they lived." "Isn't that amazing?" Zareth looked at the little girl, then at the book, then at Ambassador Grant. "Yes," he said slowly. "It is amazing. You are born knowing nothing, and yet you have learned so much about creatures that died millions of years before you existed. Perhaps there is value in your method after all." Katie beamed with pride, not fully understanding the significance of what had just happened, but knowing somehow that she had done something good. 1 month after the school visit, the Galactic Federation Council met again in the Great Hall. The same 10,000 seats were filled with the same 100 species. But the atmosphere was completely different. The anger and fear were gone, replaced by curiosity and something close to wonder. Ambassador Zareth stood in the center of the hall, where he had stood before when making his accusations. This time, his crystal body glowed with calm blue light. "Fellow delegates," he began, "I come before you today to admit that I was wrong." A murmur passed through the assembly. Among the Velthari, admitting error was extremely rare. Their inherited knowledge made them confident in everything they believed. 1 month ago, I accused humanity of a terrible crime. I said they imprisoned their children in facilities called schools. I said they subjected their young to mental and physical conditioning. I demanded justice for these supposed victims. Zareth paused, letting his words sink in. I was wrong. Not just factually wrong, but wrong in a deeper way. I made assumptions based on my own experience as a Velthari. I could not imagine a species that was born knowing nothing, and so I interpreted what I saw through the lens of my own reality. This was a failure of imagination on my part. He turned to face the human delegation, where Ambassador Lisa Grant and Captain Kevin Cole sat watching. What I witnessed at Lincoln Elementary School changed my understanding of humanity and of the universe itself. I saw children who knew nothing transformed into children who knew something. I saw the process of learning, which I had never experienced and could barely comprehend. And I saw that this process was not cruel. It was beautiful. The Keth delegate stood up. Its mandibles clicked rapidly as it spoke. I share Ambassador Zareth's conclusions. During our visit, I spoke with a human child named Oliver. He was 9 years old and small for his age. By Keth standards, he would be considered weak and unimpressive. But this child knew more about insect biology than many adult Keth. He had learned it by choice, driven by curiosity and passion. He had no hive mind to draw upon. He discovered everything himself. I found this remarkable. More delegates rose to share their own experiences. The Maravani spoke of Jake and his video games, how play could be a form of learning. The Shimmering Veil described watching children create art, expressing ideas that had never existed before. Each story painted the same picture. Human children were not prisoners. They were pioneers. Every day, they ventured into the unknown territory of knowledge and came back with new treasures. Their schools were not prisons. They were launch pads. High. Chancellor Morven finally raised his hand for silence. The ancient being looked even older than usual, as if the weight of this new understanding was pressing down on him. I have listened carefully to these reports, he said, and I have been thinking deeply about what they mean for our Federation. For thousands of years, we have measured species by their inherited capabilities. The Velthari with their ancestral knowledge, the Keth with their collective mind, the Maravani with our accumulated wisdom. We considered these gifts to be signs of advancement. He paused, his forearms spreading wide. But perhaps we were measuring the wrong things. Perhaps the true measure of a species is not what they are born with, but what they become. By this standard, humanity is not a young and primitive species. They are something entirely new, something that may surpass us all. Ambassador Grant stood and approached the center of the hall. She had prepared a speech for this moment, but now the words felt unnecessary. Instead, she spoke from the heart. Honored delegates, humanity does not claim to be better than any species in this Federation. We have flaws. Our education system is imperfect. Some children struggle. Some schools fail. We make mistakes constantly. She smiled softly. But making mistakes is how we learn. Every failure teaches us something. Every struggle makes us stronger. This is not just how we educate our children. It is how we exist as a species. We are always learning, always growing, always becoming something more than we were before. Captain Kevin Cole stepped forward to stand beside her. I spent 18 years in school, he said. I started as a crying 5-year-old who didn't want to leave his mother. I became a starship captain who has traveled to 100 worlds. That transformation was not easy. There were times I wanted to give up. Times I felt stupid and worthless. Times I failed. His voice grew stronger. But I kept going. Because that's what humans do. We fall down and get back up. We fail and try again. We face the unknown with fear in our hearts and move forward anyway. This is what our schools teach us. Not just facts and skills, but courage. The courage to grow. Zyrith stepped forward once more. His crystal form was now glowing with warm golden light, a color that indicated respect and friendship among his people. I wish to make a proposal to this council, he said. I propose that the Federation establish an exchange program. Let young members of our species spend time in human schools. Not to absorb knowledge as we traditionally do, but to experience learning the human way. To know the struggle and the triumph. To feel what that little girl Katie felt when she taught me about dinosaurs. The hall erupted in discussion. Some delegates were enthusiastic. Others were concerned. How would their children adapt to such a foreign environment? What if they were damaged by the experience? High Chancellor Morven called for order. This is a significant proposal. It would require careful planning and safeguards. But I believe it has merit. Learning to learn is perhaps the most valuable skill any being can possess. If humanity can teach us this, we would be foolish to refuse. The vote was held. Species after species registered their support. The exchange program passed with an overwhelming majority as the council session ended. Ambassador Grant found herself standing beside Xyrith. The Velthari looked at her with something she had never seen from his species before: humility. "Thank you," he said, "for showing us what we could not see ourselves." "Thank you for being willing to look," Lisa replied. "That took courage." "Courage," Xyrith repeated. "Another thing you must learn and we do not understand. Perhaps someday you can teach us that as well." 6 months later, the first alien students arrived at Lincoln Elementary School. They were small and strange and confused. They didn't know how to hold pencils or sit in chairs or raise their hands to ask questions. Mrs. Sarah Adams welcomed them to her kindergarten class with the same warm smile she gave to all her students. She sat them down in a circle and opened a picture book. "Today," she said, "we're going to learn about colors. This is red. Can everyone say red?" The human children said red easily. They had heard the word hundreds of times before. For them, this was review. The alien children struggled with the word. Their mouths were not shaped for human speech. But they tried. They failed. They tried again. And somewhere in that struggle, in that moment of frustration and effort and eventual success, something remarkable happened. They learned. Not the inherited knowledge of their ancestors, but something new. Something they had earned for themselves. One of them, a young Velthari whose crystal form was still soft and unformed, looked up at Mrs. Adams with wonder in his eyes. "I learned," he said. "I did not know red, and now I know red." Mrs. Adams smiled and patted him gently on his crystal shoulder. "That's right," she said. "And tomorrow, you'll learn something else. And the day after that, something more. That's what we do here. We learn. It never stops and it never gets old. Welcome to school." The young Velthari thought about this. Then, for the first time in the history of his species, he smiled. He was not born knowing how to smile. But he had just learned